OMG, you guys. It was only a matter of time. I'm mortified right now. I just started sweating so hard. I'm so irritated. I just recorded this entire episode and it was so good. Flowing, free, funny, and guess the fuck what? I didn't even press record. I knew this was going to happen one day. It happens to everyone who has a podcast or any goals in life. Somehow I'm not mad. I can't help but laugh. I'm not going to cry. I just can't help but laugh. So, take two. Let's go. Let me just really make sure I'm recording. Okay, I am. Well, welcome back to Hot Air with me, Joshua Robert. So, today we're going to cover the highs, the lows, and the are you kidding me 2025 moments in LGBTQ plus rights. We are talking federal budgets handing out millions to keep pride safe in Canada, Kim Davis asking the Supreme Court to rewrite history yet again because she did not like losing in 2015, Nevada making history by locking same-sex marriage into its constitution, and a whole lot of stuff in between. It's a roller coaster of wins, of headaches, and some good old-fashioned what even is the world sometimes energy. And of course, we're doing it in classic Hot Air style with some sarcasm, a little bit of snark, and always very, very honest. But before we dive in, quick housekeeping. If you love the chaos as much as I do, make sure you're following me on Instagram and TikTok at _hotairpod, where we do little episode clips, some memes, probably some stories of daily life, and probably some terrible jokes that won't land. If you know, you know. And if you've got a story or a hot take or a topic that you think I should cover, head on over to my website to submit your listener stories and topic suggestions there. I read them all and I love it. So, but I really do read them. So don't test me. hotairwithjoshuarobert.com. And for the second time this evening, let's hit it. Now, before we get to the news updates, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that this week, November 13th through 19th, is Transgender Awareness Week. It's a time to honor, to celebrate, and amplify the voices of our trans friends, family members, loved ones, community members, while also recognizing the very real challenges they continue to face every single day. And next week's episode of Hot Air on Tuesday will be fully devoted to the trans community. I'm going to dive into some of their stories, their struggles, history, and triumphs of trans folk around the world, and talking about what real allyship looks like beyond just changing your profile picture for a week or sharing a post on Instagram celebrating Transgender Awareness Week. If you're a part of the trans community or an ally and you want to share your story, your perspective, or even just a message of support, again, head to my website. I would love to feature your voices on this upcoming episode because at the end of the day, this is all about equality. And equality means that everyone gets a seat at the table. And next week, I would love to pull up a few extra chairs and reserve them for our trans friends. And now on with the news. We're going to talk about something that feels like the plot of a dystopian sitcom, but is actually Texas law because Texas is a dystopian sitcom. Senate Bill 12. Yes, we're going to call it SB 12, the 2023 Texas law that decided it was time to get into the drag policing business. The state quietly put in place a rule that says certain performances, including drag, can be labeled sexually oriented and off limits in public places if minors are present. If a business hosts one of these performances, they could be hit with a civil fine up to $10,000 per violation. Performers might face criminal charges. That $10,000 could add up real quickly. And in 2025, Texas, it turns out, thinks that this is parenting. This is how you're going to protect the children. Let's step back into the timeline a little bit so this legal stuff doesn't feel like a brute force attack on your attention. Because I know sometimes when I talk about this stuff, I'm just like spitting it out. And it doesn't really make sense sometimes. But SB 12 passed in 2023 and was set up to take effect September 1st of that year. That's when the state basically handed the legal equivalent of a measuring tape to anybody who wants to decide whether your outfit, your dance, or your wig is too sexual for public view. Almost immediately, civil rights groups, artists, and a handful of venues sued. Good, get them. In September 2023, a federal judge struck the law down, calling it constitutionally suspect. Vagueness, viewpoint discrimination, the whole nine yards. That was a big win for performers and free speech advocates. Fast forward, naturally, appeals happen. The case moved up the ladder, and just this past week, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit said, actually, Texas, you can start enforcing portions of this law while we sort out the rest. And in practice, that means enforcement is back on, at least for now. Businesses that host what the state says are sexually oriented performances where minors are present can again now face up to $10,000 per violation. And performers could face criminal charges, including a Class A misdemeanor. So, yes, the temporary block is lifted. The ACLU and other civil rights groups are still fighting. This is not over, but the immediate practical reality is stark. Venues now have real legal exposure. And we have to be precise about two things here. First, the law doesn't literally say drag, okay? The text is broader and uses phrases like sexually oriented performance, which what does that even mean? And defines sexual conduct in ways that can sweep in all sorts of acts like gestures, prosthetics, simulating sexual acts, and so on. But because drag has become the lightning rod and because the law specifically references performances that appeal to a prurient interest in sex, drag shows, especially those that are adult-oriented, are squarely in the crosshairs. Second, the law doesn't say every drag show is illegal. The appeals court even suggested that not all drag performances would necessarily violate the law. Sounds reassuring until you remember that the language is vague, and vague laws get applied unpredictably. You don't need to be a lawyer to see how vague equals chill equals self-censorship for venues. So what does this actually mean in the real world? Let's use our imagination. Let's imagine a bar in Austin, and that bar has a monthly drag brunch. Before, that was brunch with mimosas and maybe some awkward family members who weren't invited but invited themselves and are having a weird time and just don't know what to do at a drag brunch. We've pretty much all been there. And now it's going to look like the owner has to take a long look at his calendar and thinks, do I risk hosting local queens in a space where minors have been in the past? Could that $10,000 fine come for a wig or something that's too suggestive? The answer from a risk-adverse legal department and from business reality is usually don't do it. Cancel the show. Move it behind closed doors. Make it invitation only. Tell performers to perform less provocatively and rehearse a little bit more caution. This is how artistic communities get squeezed. Not by a single headline arrest, but by the slow, quiet death by compliance of venues. And let's talk about that $10,000 again. That's the civil penalty the state can seek from a business for each violation. So there could be even more violations than just one. That's not pocket change for a local venue. It's not a cheerful tax. Think of how many small venues operate on razor thin margins. One fine could wipe out a month's receipts, rent, and payroll. Suddenly, booking a drag night is not a community building decision, it's a calculus. Do we prioritize culture and queer visibility, or do we prioritize staying open? This is how legislation that protects children ends up being shorthand for make the public square less queer. Now, legally, why did the Fifth Circuit let enforcement proceed? The appeals court panel reversed the district court's ruling that had blocked the law. The panel said plaintiffs hadn't proved their First Amendment argument strongly enough at that stage, and crucially, at least one plaintiff was found to lack standing, which complicated the lower court injunction. The panel also signaled that not every drag show is thereby illegal. That sounds like nuance, but what it actually does is give Texas officials a green light to enforce the law while the lower courts continue to examine the more detailed constitutional claims. That creates a legal middle ground. Enforcement with the possibility of later reversal, depending on what is decided later. And meanwhile, venues and performers have to plan around enforcement today. So, supporters of SB 12 frame this as a very simple child protection measure. They say, we don't want lewd performances in public when kids are around. That's the talking point. It's shorthand, emotionally charged, and effective in a lot of media environments. Opponents respond with two counters. One, the law is written broadly and vaguely, enough to catch classic theater, certain cheer routines, and yes, drag. Two, there's a long history of laws that look neutral on their face, but are used to discriminate against groups based on sexual orientation or gender nonconformity. Put bluntly, if the real target is queer expression and drag culture, the law doesn't have to say we hate drag. It just has to make the cost of being public and queer really, really high. And for some, that $10,000 is really, really high. And the word vague just keeps coming to mind this whole time. The whole thing is very wishy washy. Vague laws are the gift that keeps giving for overreach because vagueness hands discretion to law enforcement and prosecutors. One local district attorney might never bring a case. Another might decide to make examples. One city might issue guidelines that are protective. Another might be aggressive. That variability is terrifying because artists and venue owners don't want to be the test case. They don't want to be the ones on the front lines of this legal war. So even if on paper not all drag shows are outlawed, in practice, many promoters and business owners will avoid the risk entirely. And let's also be honest about how this plays politically. In Texas and in many red states, culture war legislation has two functions. First, to score points with a base that views public queer expression as a provocation. Second, to reframe local policy debates as moral crusades. We've seen it time and time again. These laws are performative. Passing SB 12 signals to certain voters that lawmakers are standing up for children. That was in quotations if you're not watching on YouTube. Standing up for children, while also sending a message to cultural institutions and businesses that they should toe the line or face consequences. There's a domestic political theater to all of this, a law that acts both as policy and a campaign prop. And the courts are the backstage crew trying to clean up the set after a performance. And what about the performers? The law criminalizes certain behavior by performers as well. A Class A misdemeanor is not trivial at all. It can carry jail time and criminal record consequences depending on the jurisdictional rules. It's also a psychological blow. Performers who historically have used drag as personal expression, political critique, or pure comedy suddenly have to calculate legal risk before they step under the lights. Imagine telling a performer to, weigh the artistic value of a joke against the potential criminal exposure. And it wouldn't be a far cry to state that drag queens are pretty liberal. Most of the LGBTQ plus community are pretty liberal. And if you are a straight person who does drag, you're highly likely pretty liberal. And so red states silencing drag voices is silencing liberals that go against your political beliefs. Many performers might choose less risky forms of expression. They might be forced to move their art into private, invitation only spaces. The state might argue that that's fine because the art still exists. But when art is pushed out of public square, it disappears from life entirely. And there's a broader pattern here too. Texas is not the only state to consider or pass drag restricting laws. This fits into a national patchwork where rights and restrictions change block by block. That means a touring performer or a touring show can be legal in one state and illegal in the next. National tours, festivals, and touring queer acts now have to plan legal routes as carefully as they plan travel and lodging. And that's a new administrative and financial burden. Touring circuits once depended on open stages and welcoming venues, and now promoters have to consider legal liability, insurance, council, and whether local enforcement climates are even safe enough. That's not just inconvenient, that is career limiting. And let's address the elephant in the room. Some people, probably somebody named like Uncle Larry, he's going to say, no one's banning drag. This is just common sense protection for kids. And if you hear that, here are two quick, plain answers that you could provide as if they were asking you a question. They probably didn't ask a question, they just stated it. But here's your clapback. One, the law both singles out the kinds of performances that are historically associated with gender nonconformity and uses vague language that can sweep broadly. Two, even if the law claims to be narrowly constructed, the enforcement reality is what matters. When a venue gets slapped with $10,000 in a civil suit, the claim isn't hypothetical, it's cash. Policy is not theory when it hits a ledger. So the we're only protecting kids defense collapses under the weight of how this actually changes public life for queer people and for the businesses that host them. And if you're a venue owner, a performer, or an organizer listening right now, here's the practical, very unromantic truth. Get legal advice and insurance. Document age policies very clearly and plan for the worst, even if you expect the law to be overturned later. I hate planning for the worst. That's not how I go about life, but I also am not going to get slapped with $10,000 fine. Many organizations will draft age restriction policies, stricter door checks, and waivers, all methods to reduce exposure. But those measures are exactly what critics said would happen: art withdrawn from the public in the name of safety. The law doesn't just attack an aesthetic, it forces administrative compliance that changes the shape of the public square. Now, there's also a cultural effect here that is worth naming: erasure. We've said it before, we'll say it again. When public queer culture is made risky, a generation of young people loses public role models and spaces where they can see themselves reflected, which is kind of the goal for a lot of people. Pride events, drag brunches, queer theater, local festivals, these are not frivolous aspects of life for many people. They're community infrastructure. Laws that make it costly to host public queer expression are, in effect, an infrastructure demolition plan. If you were trying to design a policy to reduce queer visibility without explicitly saying that, limiting the venues and opportunities for public expression would be a very efficient approach, which is, by the way, a political strategy as old as, well, as old as politics. And the language that talks about sexual prosthetics that are used in some of the summaries of the law, if that is a thing that the statute addresses, sounds like it comes from a TV legal drama where the writers were given a list of props and told to invent some type of civil rights crisis. Like, it's really over the top. In practice, that means gestures, certain costumes, or accessories used during performance could be argued to exaggerate sexual characteristics. And then be deemed illegal if a minor is present. That is absurd sounding until you realize the absurdity is designed to be terrifying. If a feather boa or those fake breastplates can be assessed in a courtroom as sexual prosthetics, then the full breadth of imaginative expression could be litigated away. It reads like satire, but the penalties are no joke. Again, $10,000, no joke. So, what is next? The case will likely keep moving. Plaintiffs will push back. The ACLU and other advocacy groups have vowed to continue fighting. They argue the law violates the First Amendment and is discriminatory. And clearly, I agree if you can't tell by my tone. Courts could ultimately overturn the enforcement again, or the Supreme Court could be asked to weigh in, although that would be a long, wild ride. Meanwhile, cities and venues will react. Performers will adapt. Culture will shift for the next few months, maybe even longer. This legal uncertainty will be the air that we breathe if you're in Texas. The practical result: fewer public drag shows, more private ones, and a conservative chilling effect on nightlife programming. And before we wrap up this section, because, hot air and I love to be a little bit petty, let's be clear about one final observation. The stated purpose of protecting children is noble sounding and politically potent. This is like the go to for conservatives lately. But the way policy is made and applied matters. Laws that broadly police expression almost always fall hardest on minority communities and on the people least able to absorb the legal risk. If your stated goal is to protect children, there are extremely specific, targeted ways that you can do that, like age restrictions, zoning rules, tailored enforcement of obscenity laws with crystal clear definitions. Those things don't leave a citizen unsure whether a play, a pep rally, or a drag show could cost a small business $10,000. This law chooses the broad, scary route, and that's a political choice and clearly very intentional. If you wanted to protect the kids, there's much simpler ways and much simpler laws that you could enact. So, what can listeners do if they care about this? Well, you can support local venues and performers in very practical ways. Show up, donate, buy merch, tip generously. If you're a local business, talk to your city council and local representatives. Support legal groups that litigate these cases. They cost real money. And tell the story. Culture matters, and the erosion of public queer expression is not a niche issue. It's about who gets to be visible in our democracy. Laws that change the texture of public life change citizenship itself. If you care about speech, about art, about kids seeing a wide world of expression, those are the stories worth telling. And to close this out, not to conclude because we have a lot more coming, remember that the law alone doesn't decide culture. People decide culture. Laws can make it harder to organize, harder to perform, harder to gather, but they do not entirely wipe out communities that are committed to their art and that are committed to each other. That said, legal attacks like SB 12 are pretty brutal tools precisely because they raise the cost of public existence. It makes it harder just to be a badass drag queen. Today's $10,000 fine is tomorrow's canceled show, and then the next thing after that is a closed venue. If you value public art in a public square that includes all people, as I do, it matters who defends that space legally and socially. And in Texas right now, that space has a very big target on it. And now, from Texas, we're going to go to Canada, my homeland that I abandoned in 2011 and never looked back. So, Canada is doing something that is kind of wild for 2025. They're actually putting their money where their maple syrup covered mouth is. I'm going to get so much shit for saying that, but I had to, okay? The government just announced that the upcoming federal budget will include 7.5 million, yes, million with an M, not B as in billion, million, to help LGBTQ plus communities cover the costs of security and insurance for pride events across the country. Now, before you roll your eyes and say, oh, great, another rainbow washing campaign. I mean, I would get that response, but hold on. This isn't a new logo on a coffee cup, okay, just for the month of June. It's a literal financial support to help keep Pride festivals safe. And we always say, put your money where your mouth is, and Canada's doing it. And the reason, because unfortunately, the so-called friendly North has been seeing a rise in threats and hate incidents targeting queer and trans people at community events. Pride, as we know, used to be about celebration, about glitter, about dancing in the streets, and at least one person in a unicorn onesie that's handing out free hugs. But over the past few years, it's started to feel a little bit, well, different. Thanks, Trump. I believe. The joy is still there, but so are the police barricades, the bomb-sniffing dogs, and the headlines about protesters showing up to save the children from drag queens. Again, drag queens are terrifying. Again, drag queens are terrifying. Save the children, please. Good Lord. And yes, even in Canada, a country that literally invented politeness, those threats are rising. And that is where the 7.5 million comes in. The funding is being folded into Canada's next federal budget under a new program that will help Pride organizers pay for things like security personnel, barricades, and event insurance, which, by the way, has gotten so expensive, it's almost easier to host a Beyoncé concert than a small town Pride parade. Some local festivals have actually been canceled because they could not afford the insurance premiums required to protect against hate fuel disruptions. And that is some straight up bullshit. So, yes, the 7.5 million may sound like pocket change compared to what governments usually spend, but for smaller pride committees, it's a lifeline. It's the difference between pride is canceled this year, sorry everybody, and see you at the parade, bring your rainbow speedos, it's going to help pride stay alive. Now, the cynics will say, okay, but shouldn't the government be focusing on something else? And sure, every budget announcement comes with its share of people clutching their pearls. Why are we funding parades when the economy is struggling? Well, newsflash, safety is not a luxury item. Queer people existing safely in public is not a frivolous expense. It's kind of the bare minimum. And if you're still mad about the idea of your tax dollars, if you're in Canada, going towards keeping drag queens safe, I would just like to remind you that those same tax dollars are paying for a bridge that literally goes nowhere in Saskatchewan. Google it. Let's not act like 7.5 million is breaking the national bank. That to the government is pocket change. It's not pocket change to the queer community. And of course, there is another slightly heavier layer to this. The fact that this funding is necessary at all should make us pause. Pride started, as we know, as a protest, a march against police brutality, state oppression, and bigotry. It was never meant to need riot fences or threat assessments. The fact that 50 years later, crazy, 50 years, organizers are applying for grants to afford security guards just so people can dance in rainbow crop tops without being harassed. That says a lot about where we still are, well, as a nation and as an entire fucking planet. And to be fair, let's be fair, okay? Let's not be too hard on Canada. Canada is not alone in this. Across the world, LGBTQ plus events have become flashpoints for extremist anger. From drag bans in the US, which we just talked about, to anti-gay marches in Europe. What's happening in Canada is part of a much bigger story. Queer joy is being treated as a threat yet again. The same people who tell us pride should be family friendly are the ones making it unsafe for families to actually show up because you're the ones who hate us. So while 7.5 million might not sound like much in the grand scheme of government spending, like symbolically though, it's huge. It says that we see you, we know the threats are real, we're not going to let fear cancel pride. It's a statement that queer people shouldn't have to foot the bill for other people's hate. And I, quite frankly, am very much here for it. And I'll be honest, it's refreshing to see a government acknowledge that LGBTQ plus safety isn't just about rainbow crosswalks, which apparently are terrifying now, especially in Florida, and Instagram campaigns again for the month of June. It's about real world, tangible support. It's about putting your money where your mouth is. It's about letting the drag queens drag, the dancers dance, and the queers be queer without having to check over our shoulder every few minutes. And I would be lying if I said I don't get nervous at pride events because who knows? Like, this is dark, but it's like, is someone gonna drive through the crowd? We've seen it happen time and time again. I don't know how it hasn't happened yet. And again, I can already hear the critics, but this is just political optics. It's budget season. They're buying votes from the gays, to which I say, well, sweetie, duh. Yes, but if you're going to buy votes, at least buy ours and do something for us. We'll give you a parade, a playlist, and some kick-ass fucking photo ops. Buy our votes. Give us the $7.5 million. That is how politics works. But joking aside, I mean, that wasn't really a joke. I kind of stand by that. But Canada's move sends a message that a lot of countries, United States of America, could stand to hear right now. Protecting queer spaces is not performative. It's preservation. It's ensuring that pride does not become a nostalgia act, something that we used to do before it got too dangerous. That would wreck my soul. No. Pride is not just a party. It's a declaration that we are still here, that we're still loud, that we're still proud. And if it takes a few $1,000,000 to make sure that we can have our flags without flinching, then I would consider it money well spent. So to Canada, thank you. Get it, Homeland, not just for the syrup or the healthcare, even though our healthcare is bomb as fuck, but for remembering that queer safety is a national interest. Let's just hope that the next time the budget rolls around, it includes a little something extra for mental health support because honestly, dealing with all the hate every year in June is exhausting and therapy is not cheap. Okay? I know. I go every Tuesday. So perhaps every every LGBTQ plus person should get a little extra funding for therapy after Pride Month. But anyway, that's the tea for that. Pride is getting more expensive, but thanks to this budget, at least it's not getting canceled. So go put something sparkly on and remember, safety may be priceless, but apparently in Canada, it only costs 7.5 million. And now from Canada, we're going back down south with a little bit of love, a little bit of lawsuits, and a lot of bit of bigotry. We're going to talk again about Kim Davis. Do you remember her? How could you ever forget? She is the county clerk from Kentucky who once turned denying marriage licenses into a full-time fucking personality trait. Yes, that Kim Davis. You know, she's back in the headlines because she asked the Supreme Court to take another look at marriage equality, and specifically the case that made same-sex marriage legal nationwide in 2015, Obergefell v. Hodges. I'm not going to rehash it, but you can listen to my previous episode about Kim Davis if you want a recap. And in what can only be described as the judicial equivalent of an eye roll, the Supreme Court said, nah, girl, not happening. They denied her request to revisit Obergefell v. Hodges, the landmark decision that said love is love, paperwork is paperwork, and the government should probably mind its own business when it comes to who's walking down the aisle. And if you don't know Obergefell v. Hodges, I also have an episode with two of the plaintiffs, Kim and Tammy from Obergefell v. Hodges. I did a great interview with them. Great as in I had a great time. I'm not saying I'm a great interviewer, but maybe I am. Anyway, it's an episode worth listening to. It's really good. So before we start clapping too loudly, though, let's unpack what actually happened here. Davis, who spent years framing herself as a martyr for religious freedom, was sued by couples she refused to issue marriage licenses to, and she lost multiple times. She was ordered to pay damages, her appeals failed, and then now she wanted the Supreme Court to swoop in like some divine sequel. And spoiler alert, Kimmy, it's not happening. On one side of the reaction spectrum, you got progressives popping metaphorical champagne, sighing with relief that this court, this Supreme Court, shocking I know, did not open Pandora's wedding registry. LGBTQ plus advocates are saying this denial reaffirms that marriage equality is not up for renegotiation every election cycle. And on the other side of that positive feedback and celebration, the usual suspects are clutching their pearls. Yet again, a lot of pearl clutching today. They're writing Facebook manifestos about the death of religious liberty and declaring that straight marriages will now spontaneously combust because two lesbian women somewhere are registering for a Vitamix blender together. God forbid. And then meanwhile, while this is all happening and going down, in Nevada, something genuinely historic happened that deserves far more attention. The state became the first in the entire country, to formally protect same-sex marriage in its constitution. Think about that. The same Nevada that once advertised quickie divorces and slot machine weddings is now leading the pack in defending love under law. And maybe what happens in Vegas should stay in Vegas because apparently equality finally hit the jackpot there. And secret time. Not really secret time, but kind of secret time. I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I'll cover this later, maybe in a year. I'll do a full episode about this, but I got married in Las Vegas at the same chapel that Britney Spears and Sarah Michelle Gellar got married in. And that might be confusing to some that are like, you're fucking married, Josh? What the hell? Don't worry. We'll get there, okay? We're going to go there one day. Okay, but bringing it back to Nevada, this is huge because it means that even if the federal courts wobble in the future, the people of Nevada have spoken. Love is not conditional, it's constitutional. But of course, nothing is cut and dry and plain and simple. This is where it gets just a little bit complicated. I've been scrolling through posts and comments because you know me. Apparently, I like emotional self-harm on the social medias. And a lot of people are celebrating this, but also a lot of people are very frustrated. The vibe is basically, yay, we won again, but why are we still having to do this? And it's 2025. We're supposed to be planning the next Pride playlist, not defending the right to say I do. It's disheartening, which totally makes sense. It's disheartening to realize that every time there's progress, someone somewhere digs up the same tired debate like it's a vintage think piece. We've got queer kids coming out younger, trans folk living more authentically, families built on love, and yet we're still dealing with clerks from a decade ago who think that their Bible gives them a badge, who look like they rolled out of a fucking underground bunker that they were stuck in for about 50 years with a Mormon cult, okay? That's what that's what Kim Davis looks like to me. Have you seen that show, Kimmy Schmidt? On Netflix. It's written by Tina Fey. If you have not, it's hysterical, but she looks like one of the Mormon women that's locked in this bunker. Oh gosh. Bring it back. I'm bringing it back, okay? The exhaustion from the queer community is real because fighting for equality should not have to feel like a recurring subscription service that never lets you cancel. Every year, some new bill, some new lawsuit, some new concerned parent, I'm going to put that in quotation marks, concerned parent, trying to roll back rights that should have been settled years ago. And still, this week's news reminds us that the system can hold the line, at least for now. The Supreme Court could have entertained Davis's appeal. They could have cracked open that door just a little bit, but instead, they slammed it shut in her face. Nevada doubled down on love, and all across the internet, people are remembering that progress doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with a quiet and firm no. And that is powerful because no, in this case, means no, you do not get to relitigate equality. No, you don't get to use religion as a permission slip for discrimination. No, you don't get to turn back the clock just because you're uncomfortable watching somebody else be free and in love. And I fear Kim Davis is simply uncomfortable because she's had 4 husbands. Go find your 5th, girl, and let us gays get married. So, yes, I say celebrate this. Dance a little bit. Maybe send Kim Davis a thank you card for unintentionally reminding Americans why separation of church and state still matters and is still a thing. But also, let's sit with that weird little ache that sits in the background of our head, the part that's tired of cheering for the same basic human rights over and over, because that fatigue is real. Progress shouldn't always feel like deja vu, but maybe, just maybe, the bright side, each time we go through this cycle, we are wearing down the resistance a little bit more. Each court decision, each state amendment, each headline is another reminder that love keeps winning, even if it has to keep showing up in court in order to do it. So here's to Nevada for locking equality into its constitution. Here's for the Supreme Court, surprisingly remembering the assignment for once. And here's to everyone who's still fighting, still showing up, still saying, we're not done until everyone gets to live and love freely. Because at the end of the day, the real story is not Kim Davis. It's not Kim Davis's denial. It's the collective refusal of an entire community to back down. We could just hide and run into the shadows like they did before the 80s. But love wins, sure. But it also persists. It outlasts hate, it outlaws discrimination, and it outshines every dusty argument dragged out of the past, again, by some woman who looks like she was locked in an underground bunker for decades in a Mormon cult. And that's the kind of headline that I want to keep reading, not the one about a Mormon woman in a cult, but love winning. Am I going to get hate for that? I think you know what I mean, right? So there you have it. A mix of victories, reminders that the fight isn't over, and enough absurdity to make you like roll your eyes so hard you might actually see your brain. Canada is investing in safety so that pride can happen without panic attacks. Kim Davis got told, no thanks, honey, by the Supreme Court yet again. And Nevada set the bar for constitutional equality. And drag queens might be living in a little bit of fear, but I really hope that they stand up and they keep doing the damn thing. It's a lot. It's messy. It's frustrating. And sometimes it's downright exhausting. I might go take a nap after doing this twice. But here's the thing. Progress keeps moving. Even when it feels slow, it might feel uneven or a little ridiculous. Sometimes it picks up steam and then it slows down. And that's what we'll keep talking about here on Hot Air. We're going to talk about wins, losses, and the stories in between. All served with a wink, a shrug, maybe a cocktail, definitely eye rolls, sarcasm and sass, you know the drill. Remember, if you want to keep up with me, follow on TikTok and Instagram at _hotairpod. If you got a story idea or a rant that you think that I should go on, hotair@joshuarobert.com. You can submit your stories and your topic suggestions there, and perhaps I'll share your voice on an upcoming episode. I think that's enough talk for now. So maybe go hug someone you love. I'm going to go hug my dog, put on something sparkly. I'm going to go actually put on a bathrobe after I shower, or just scream into the void about how ridiculous this world can be sometimes. And I'll be right here breaking it all down, one crazy headline at a time. You know how I do. But until then, I will see you next Tuesday.